Hi, everybody, and welcome back to yet another cracking installment of the Matt Brown Show. This is the Secrets of Fail series where we're talking about our failures. I know, it's surprising, right? But with us on the line is Jim Fielding, partner at Archer Gray. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Matt. I appreciate being here.
So, Jim, why don't you kick us off with the elevator pitch about Archer Gray? What do we need to know?
Sure. Archer Gray is an independent media company that creates quality storytelling in all forms of media: narrative film, narrative television, unscripted podcasts. And the division I especially work in is trying to take the IP we create in the storytelling divisions and look for what we call 360 opportunities with them, develop an ecosystem around the content and around the story. And I've been with them a little over 2 years. I spent most of my career in big media, Disney, DreamWorks, Fox, and was looking for a change, looking for a chance to be more entrepreneurial and help build something smaller into something bigger. And that's what we're doing.
So what is your story of fail for today?
My story of fail for today is when I became president of Disney Store in 2008, May of 2008. I know that's taking us back a while, but it's a good story of fail. I had been serving in Disney Consumer Products as the head of retail sales and marketing, and Disney bought the Disney stores back from a licensee, and I got the opportunity to become president in May of 2008. And had a failure right after that.
So talk to us about what you learned from that fail.
Well, the biggest thing I learned from the fail, it's one of my mantras now in life, which is control the controllable, because the fail was unfortunately partially caused or initiated by the global meltdown of 2008 and what happened in retail overall. So as you can imagine, in May of 2008, I was feeling good. We were building a team. We had a clear mission and vision. Things were going well. And as many of your listeners will know, August, September, the world changed pretty dramatically. And I never anticipated, I think the fail that I'm speaking about is I never anticipated that the downside could be as big as it was. And so after basically 3 months of building and optimism and just positive energy and moving forward, I had to spend the next year basically dismantling what we had built, but also reorganizing the company to be more lean, more streamlined, more efficient in the face of what was dramatic changes to real estate, mall traffic, consumer behavior, consumer spend. Literally, the business dropped over 25% overnight. A quarter of your business is just gone. And we weren't structured for that. We weren't prepared for that. And so I think, the learning was you need to have your contingency plans in place. I think I'm an optimist by nature. And I think everything I was planning for the business was just up, up, up. And when the signal started to change, I didn't react fast enough.
So if you could go back in time, what would you do differently?
I think I would have pulled my senior team together and scenario planned A, B, C, D scenarios, from realistic to exuberant optimism to doomsday scenario, and have had a prepared contingency plan. I'm not saying something I could have just pulled out of the drawer, but I think even a mindset of, if these numbers start to do what they're doing, how would we react? And how would we keep the business moving forward? And how would we keep our people focused? And how would we right size our spends across the board? And I think, the mantra I mentioned earlier that I walked out of that with is control the controllable. Some of the things, to our defense, was not in our control. I wasn't in charge of the global banking crisis. I wasn't in charge of subprime mortgages. And I hadn't done any of that on my own. So, like many people in our industry, we were victims of a banking system that was collapsing and consumers that were getting hurt. And when you're a president of a retailer, Disney Store is about wishes and dreams and indulgences. It's not basic needs. And we needed to have that contingency plan in place, that worst case scenario in place, so that we were more proactive and not reactive. Because I felt, especially for the first 3 months after the crash, the quote crash, we were running in fire drill mode, for lack of a better word, working insane hours, working extremely hard, caring. I mean, we were super caring. We were smart. We were trying to figure it out. But I think we would have been much better off had we spent some time trying to anticipate the worst case scenario and be more proactive.
So, I hear what you're saying. I think it's a hard thing to know what to prepare for. Do you know what I mean?
Like, exactly.
It's
yes.
like how do you know? Like, I mean,
I know.
When I first, my company at the time when COVID arrived we had 55 people, and I heard about this virus. So, like when I was in England, there was bird flu, avian flu, and you hear about these things, and it doesn't end well. And then I just thought, well, maybe I'll see. And then I just watched it every single day. And then it spread from like China to Singapore. And as you could see, it was starting to spread. And I knew like intrinsically at that point that I like that day. It was like a Saturday or something. And on the Monday morning, I said, everyone, I said, right, you all working from home. And we were about, I think probably 2 weeks before the government came in, even a month, came in and shut it down. So we had that sort of, lead time to change our operational sort of, structure, if you like. And we were lucky because you couldn't even buy headsets 2 weeks later.
It's so fascinating. I mean, it's interesting what you're saying, because I do think COVID and what we went through back when I'm talking about, I mean, it was a global crisis, right? And you could kind of watch it move around the world, to your point. I think what's interesting is, when I was with Disney, we were based in California, and we did have a contingency plan for earthquakes. When you're a California-based company, we literally had binders on what to do in a natural disaster, right? What to do in a fire or an earthquake, and even our data centers, and where our files were stored and how we were going to get the POS system in the stores back up. What we didn't have was a version of those binders for an economic crisis, right? And what you have for a natural crisis and economic crisis, you can't necessarily use, because it's not like, we had lost electricity, and thank God no one had lost their lives, or we had lost buildings. There wasn't a physical thing. It was, but it was similar. It was a crisis that I think we could have prepared for. I don't think even in our best, Matt, we could have anticipated how hard it was. Like, I don't think any of us could have really sat there and said, what the bottom looked like and how far we were going to have to go. I think the other thing that I learned is stick to your vision, stick to your mission, right size as much as you can. And then when it turns again, which it does, things are cyclical, you'll be smarter and you'll be more streamlined. And then when you start riding the wave up, don't just instantly go back in and start building in all the infrastructure and build all the costs. Temper the reaction, temper that positivity, and build it slowly and steadily. And I think by nature, the way that I lead, and I think I believe in servant leadership. I think the other thing that I probably underestimated is just, and you probably learned this managing your team during COVID, just the amount of communication it takes in those situations to make sure that every person understands the context, the decision making, and that they're part of a team, and that we were thinking about them and we were trying to figure it out. And I think in those situations, and COVID was the same way, most people by human nature just start thinking, well, what does this mean for me? Right? Forget about the company. What does this mean for me? And I underestimated, as the president of Disney Store, how much one-on-one time I would have to spend with all levels of the organization to listen to them and acknowledge their concerns and try to make them feel better. I couldn't fix it, but I could at least listen to them and make them feel better.
So what's your advice to other entrepreneurs or CEOs, given what you now know?
Yeah, I know. It's, again, by nature, I think I am an optimist by nature. I think most entrepreneurs and CEOs, most people are an optimist in that role, because you have to have a vision and you have to believe in what you're doing, and you you have passion for what you're doing, for what you're creating. And I don't think it matters what industry you're in, or if you're creating a product or a service or SaaS. My advice that I learned is to always temper that optimism with some realism, even borderline pessimism, and to not overbuild cost and infrastructure in advance of revenue or in advance of a forecast. And it's hard. I think this is a really hard balancing act. I'm not saying I have the magic formula, because you have to invest in the business and you have to grow the business. But I think it's like controlled growth is probably what I would say is my learning, is that. And I also think, as the CEO, for anybody, whatever size company you're in, or whatever business you're doing, surround yourself with really bright people. And for me, I personally, because I am an optimist CEO with more of a marketing and brand and product background, I needed a borderline pessimist CFO. Like, I needed someone who was my counterbalance to temper my optimism and be direct and honest with me and say, you know what, Jim, that's a great idea. We can't do that right now. So let's put that on the idea board. Let's put that in the parking lot, and let's do these 3 things instead. And so I always believe in like building your team around you, but particularly don't build a team that looks and thinks all like you. Because if you have 10 optimists in the room, you're just going to optimize yourself. You're going to optimist yourself into oblivion. Just the same way, I don't think you can have 10 pessimists. I think it's about balancing.
Where were you, Jim? Where were you when I was in COVID? You should have messaged me.
Where was I? I know, where was I? But this is what, when you first, when this opportunity came up and you first contacted me, I mean, I'm dragging out a story from 2008, but I grew so much as a leader and as a CEO in that time. And it has changed how I've approached every role since then. And I will always be an optimist. I will always be a cheerleader. I will always be a vision-led leader. I mean, I believe in vision. I believe in mission. And I always try and take a team with me on that road. But if you met anybody that I worked with, they could tell you who my counterpart was on my team, who would be my truth teller. And maybe not in front of everybody, but man, they'd take me in my office and say, nope, you can't do those 5 things right now, and here's the reasons why. And I think it's that fact-based decision making that's tempered with your instinct and your gut. It's that blend that you do learn over time, And I think it's easy. It's easy to do it both ways. To be too optimistic and too pessimistic. Too pessimistic, you might miss opportunities. You might, too pessimistic, you might not take that risk that could really turn into something. Too optimistic, you could tank the company.
Jim, thank you for being on Secrets of Fail, man. I hope
I'm
sure your story is going to make a difference to a lot of people.
I wish everybody the best. And by the way, you have to fail to learn. You know that. Your whole show's about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jim.
All
Thanks,
right.
everyone.
Thank you.